fourth generation version of Kia's Sportage family crossover model builds on the step forward its predecessor made, this time round offering strident looks, more accomplished driving dynamics and a much nicer cabin. It's a car the Qashqai-class will like.
For most car makers, it's merely very important these days to have a credible crossover model on offer in the showrooms. For Kia though, the provision of such a thing is fundamental to its fortunes. The brand increasingly associated with this car, the Sportage. It's a spacious, family-sized Qashqai-class model that we're going to look at here in its much improved fourth generation guise. The original version of this car dates back to 1993, but it wasn't until the launch of the third generation version in 2010 that buyers began really taking it seriously. More than any other model, the Mark III design turned Kia's fortunes around, to the point where, by the time of the launch of its successor, this car, in early 2016, the Sportage was accounting for nearly a third of the brand's total sales volume in this country. With the crossover segment's importance continuing to grow, soon it'll account for more than 10% of the European market, the significance of this car can only increase for Kia, particularly as the brand now has a smaller Nero model in this sector for customers to graduate up from. So, the Koreans had to get this car right. Have they though? Well, quite possibly. The styling aims for a more upmarket Germanic feel, something you'll also find in the redesigned cabin. Plus, big steps forward have been made in terms of electronic safety provision and media connectivity. Under the bonnet, there are fewer changes, but a potent 1.6-litre TGDI petrol turbo power plant has been added to the range, one of the key engines you can order with the lineup's sportiest GT line trim level. Now with that variant, you get a look properly reflective of handling changes to steering and suspension that aim to give all models a kind of firmer, more dynamic feel that Kia thinks crossover customers want. So, have they got the recipe right? And can this car repeat the success of its predecessor? Time to find out. There were lots of reasons why so many people bought the previous generation version of this Sportage, but a dynamic driving experience was rarely one of them. It did the job, but that was about it. That going forward, Kia has higher aspirations than that is clear from a glance at the changes made to this Mark IV model. The completely fresh platform is 39% stiffer than before, plus the Korean brand has thoroughly overhauled the suspension and redeveloped the steering system. As a result, you know the driving experience is going to be different this time around. Just how much better can it be though when the mainstream engine range is fundamentally the same as before? Your Kia dealer will take issue with this observation, pointing out that all the power plants on offer have been significantly overhauled, which is true, but the changes in question mostly relate to efficiency improvements that are necessary to meet Euro 6 guidelines, rather than drivability enhancements. The Korean brand is also keen for us to note that a completely fresh petrol turbo 1.6-litre TGDI unit has been added to the lineup. Although again, that's of limited relevance given this derivative's relatively high price and the fact that the vast majority of Sportage buyers in this country choose a diesel. This diesel mostly, the 114 brake horsepower 1.7-litre CRDI unit we're trying here. It's the alternative at the bottom of the range to the 130 brake horsepower 1.6-litre GDI petrol variant that Kia still includes for people on a budget. Both models come only with front-wheel drive and 6-speed manual transmission and record identical 11.1 second sprint times to 62 miles an hour. Despite that, they feel very different to drive, mainly down to the fact that the diesel has nearly twice as much pulling power. It's 280 Nm torque figure, making it not only quicker through the gears, but also allowing it to pull a brake trailer of up to 1,400 kilograms. So far, so good. Where this unit shows a little more of its age is where it comes to refinement. The engineers have done their best to disguise this with copious amounts of extra noise insulation, but it's still clear that Kia's next generation of CRDI engines will have higher standards to reach. Those comments apply further up the range too. In other words, whichever engine you choose, it'll make a little more noise than the class norm, but it's nothing you can live with. I mentioned towing. If you're going to be doing that or travelling over longer distances, you're more likely to want to look at one of the 2-litre diesel variants, as you'll have to do if you want the option of automatic transmission. Now, Kia is offering this power plant in 134 bhp and 182 bhp states of tune this time around, but the much wider availability lower down the range of the lesser unit will make it by far the more popular choice. You might as well take the more affordable option, actually, given that the performance of these two variants is so similar. True, there is a bit of a difference when it comes to top speed, 114 miles per hour against 125 miles per hour, but the 10.1 second rest to 62 miles per hour time of the 134 bhp derivative is less than a second off that of the Poké version, while the 2,200 kilogram brake towing total is exactly the same for both models. We should make the point that if you do go for a 2-litre Sportage, you have to have all-wheel drive, which, by the way, isn't the case if you go for Hyundai's mechanically identical rival Tucson model. Still, that 4x4 system is worth having, one of those that keeps you front-driven most of the time, but when traction fails, it can instantly send up to 40% of torque to the rear axle. There's also a selectable lock mode that keeps all 4 wheels turning at equal speed should you need to extricate your Sportage from somewhere, well, that you probably shouldn't have ventured in the first place. Another engine which must be mated to all-wheel drive is the freshly introduced 1.6-litre TGDI petrol turbo unit I mentioned earlier. High-powered petrol engine 4x4 models are rare to find in this segment, but that's because buyers don't tend to want this combination. Preference this Sportage derivative is unlikely to change. The engine develops a useful 174 brake horsepower, which is enough to propel this variant to 62 miles an hour in 9.2 seconds en route to 126 miles an hour. And the package comes only with the sporty GT line trim that Kia's heavily trying to promote with this Mark IV model, possibly because its more dynamic look emphasises the quite significant ride and handling improvements that have taken place this time around. Which brings me back to where I began and the dynamic differences that aim to set this Mark IV model apart from its predecessor. In developing this design, Kia spent ages retuning the suspension to work more effectively with the stiffer chassis. Plus, the engineers set out to sort the steering system too, moving its electric motor directly into the rack so that the responses would be more direct and feelsome. The result was put to the test with development and, rather bravely, we thought, a press launch at the Nürburgring Nordschleife racetrack, but it's a confidence that's largely justified by the end result. True, we can imagine some crossover buyers finding the ride a bit over firm, but provided you avoid specifying the larger 18 and 19-inch wheel sizes, that isn't too much of an issue. Anyway, the payoff comes with cornering agility and minimal standards of body roll that few competitors can match. The shift action of the 6-speed manual gearbox is positive too, and yes, the helm is also better, although you get the feeling that Kia's engineers still tend to confuse steering weight with steering feel. Ultimately, though, it's an accomplished and very European feeling package, which is probably exactly what the Korean brand was after. Do you like it? Well, it's important to Kia that you do, because looks were high on the list of reasons why customers bought the previous generation model. This 4th generation version doesn't perhaps have quite the elegance of that car, but arguably a bit more street-side presence has been introduced this time around, particularly at the front end, which seems to remind many of a Junior League Porsche Cayenne. Trademark Sportage touches include the windscreen's castellated top edge and the way that the raked-back C-pillar contrasts with the angled rear window. This is, in short, a confident piece of penmanship. Now, as I've suggested, you especially notice this at the front end, which is dominated by a wide interpretation of Kia's tiger nose main grille, this time around intentionally separated from headlights. These extend along the side of a high bonnet that sweeps seamlessly into the low roofline. Now opt for the GT line variant that's been added to the lineup, and you get a more dynamic look emphasised by another Cayenne-like touch, ice cube style LED front fog lamps. Otherwise, the same space is occupied by these chrome-trimmed gloss black air intakes. Move to the side, and if a previous owner, you might start to notice the extra size of this 4th generation model. The need to extend the wheelbase has made the car 40mm longer than before, with over 75% of that increase between the axles, which explains why the rear doors look longer. That extra length has also been artfully used in creating a sleeker and more rakish shape that features an almost sports car-like ratio between sheet metal and glass. This is complemented by straight, flowing character lines, narrow side windows, deeply sculpted sides and bold wheel arches encasing wheels that can be up to 19 inches in diameter. Now the rear shares this more mature upmarket approach with a mixture of concave and convex surfaces and horizontal lines which together aim to emphasise a wide and stable stance. On plusher versions, a chrome strip links these combination lights that feature a distinctive nighttime signature, while further up you get this neat roof spoiler below a shark fin antenna. As usual, of course, what's more important is the stuff that you can't see. The completely redesigned platform this car shares with Hyundai's rival Tucson model is 39% more rigid than before, thanks to over half of it now being fashioned from advanced high-strength steel. Time to look inside. Now, it's now slightly easier to get in and out because the floor has been lowered by 40mm. And once behind the wheel, you'll find a driver-centric fascia that's a little more angled towards the driver, with flush-fitting fixtures and trim, soft-to-the-touch materials, and smart detailing like the silver trim used around these air vents. It's a big step forward from the cabin of the previous model, which really wasn't able to match the sophistication of the exterior styling. Here, although you still wouldn't imagine you were in a premium brand product, it's a world away from the kind of thing that you would have found in a Kia even just 5 years back. Helping in this regard is a reduction in the number of switches and buttons thanks to the installation of this centre dash infotainment touchscreen. It's a standard feature provided you avoid entry-level trim. In this case, it's 7 inches in size. A larger 8-inch layout is offered further up the range. Either way, the monitor includes standard navigation as well as effectively marshalling the usual audio, informational and Bluetooth phone features, including music streaming and voice control. This is also the portal from which you get access to the full suite of Kia connected services created in association with TomTom. Activate the connectable Wi-Fi system to your phone, and via these you can find 4-day weather forecasts, be advised of speed camera locations, get live traffic information that can reroute you around jams, and use a local search function that can direct your Sportage to anything from a supermarket to a service station. Anything this touchscreen can't tell you may well be covered off by the further screen provided between the two main dials of the instrument binnacle. This deals with trip computer readouts, compass, tyre pressures and various vehicle settings, and further up the range is upgraded into a larger 4.2-inch Supervision TFT display that amongst other things will also bring navigation instructions more directly into your line of sight. Getting comfortable in front of the leather-stitch 3-spoke multifunction wheel is easy, and if you owned the previous version of this car, then you might notice that forward vision has been improved thanks to slimmer A-pillars and a lowered position for the door mirrors too. It is still pretty difficult to see out of the back though, so it's just as well that provided you avoid entry-level trim, rear parking sensors and a rear view camera come as standard. Are there issues? Not many. The ambiance is a little dark and sombre, and the fake stitching along the dash top is a reminder of Kia's less sophisticated days. Plus, we would have preferred the various connectivity ports prominently displayed here in front of the gear stick. You get twin 12-volt sockets plus USB and aux-in points to be hidden away in this storage box between the seats. That would have enabled phones and gaming devices to be charged away from prying eyes. Talking of storage areas, the glove box and the door pockets aren't especially large for what is supposed to be a family car, but we'll forgive this Kia that for its provision of a thankfully conventional handbrake, next to which are twin cup holders of different sizes to better suit the various dimensions of your morning latte. A central front armrest is standard across the range, and there's also an overhead compartment for your sunglasses. Now I'm in the back, I'll mention something I should have touched upon in the front, namely that the seats are more comfortable this time around. They offer firmer side supports and softer foam, plus here in the rear they recline for greater comfort on longer trips. Headroom's reasonable too, despite the sloping roofline. Not so good is the rather claustrophobic feel created by the dark trim and these narrow side windows, also a problem with the previous generation version of this car. Kia has mitigated things a little this time around though, with the wheelbase increase that I alluded to earlier. A 30mm improvement that, well, it significantly enhances legroom by around 16mm. There's no change in cabin width though, so 3 adults will continue to be as closely aligned as they usually tend to be in this class of car. At least here though, things are helped a little in this regard by this relatively low transmission tunnel. Let's take a look out back. Raise the slightly heavy tailgate and you'll find that boot capacity has risen by 26 litres with this Mark IV model to 491 litres with a temporary spare wheel in place. A feature, by the way, that's standard across the range, providing you avoid the entry-level 1.6 litre petrol engine. Now, a lot of other rivals fob you off with fiddly tyre mobility kits, and they still can't match the cargo space on offer here. And this in Qashqai, for example, has 61 litres less, while comparable crossovers like Ford's Kuga and Subaru's XV are even more restricted than that. The luggage bay features a 2-position cargo floor and a useful underfloor section that allows you to stow the load bay cover away when it's not in use. We would have liked to see a 12-volt socket included though. One more significant annoyance is that if you need more space and you want to fold down the rear seat backs, there's no boot-accessible remote release handles that you can tug on. In fact, you don't even get a catch on the seat top shoulder. And that means it's necessary to stop what you're doing so you can go round and open the side door in order to activate handles on the rear seat bases. Still, at least when the rear bench is lowered, the floor revealed is flatter than it was before and reasonably spacious, opening up 1,480 litres of fresh air. Kia may no longer want to be seen as a value brand, but it knows it must maintain a policy of value pricing. Hence the importance of being able to offer an entry-level version of this car at around the £18,000 price point and a diesel for under £20,000. The variants in question offer either 1.6 litre GDI petrol or 1.7 litre CRDI diesel power and represent the lower tier of the Sportage lineup, a place in the range where you're limited to front-wheel drive and manual transmission. Nearly 85% of customers opt to find the £1,550 premium required for that CRDI model, and most are unwilling to make the specification compromises required by entry-level trim, which will leave many with a Sportage model typically like this one, a 1.7 litre CRDI variant with the 2 trim level and a price pitched at around £22,000. If you want more power, then it must be mated to all-wheel drive, a system fitted to the 2 litre CRDI diesel variants. There are 2 of these with either 134 or 182 brake horsepower options, plus at this level in the lineup, there's a chance to spend just over £1,300 more on a 6-speed automatic gearbox if you want it. The unit in question is an old-style torque converter auto, but you can get a more modern twin-clutch automatic box as an option on the top petrol version, the minority interest 174 brake horsepower 1.6 litre TGDI petrol turbo model, which only comes in 4x4 guise. If all-wheel drive is a priority, we'd steer clear of this variant and stick with the 2 litre diesel, probably in its 134 bhp guise, since the 182 bhp engine is only available with a top KX4 trim level that demands a pricey budget of around £30,000. Enough on the Sportage range. What about the value proposition that pricing represents? Well, in assessing that, we should probably start with this model sister design, Hyundai's Tucson, since under the skin, these two cars are pretty much the same. If you want two-wheel drive, your choice between these two contenders will probably come down to personal preference, since a Sportage only undercuts its Korean stablemate by around £500. If you want all-wheel drive though, you're probably going to choose a Sportage, since it alone offers 4x4 traction with more affordable trim. It's more probable though that the car in this class you're more likely to be considering as an alternative will be the one that first defined the family crossover segment, Nissan's Qashqai. The Nissan's good to drive, but it offers less space than this Kia does for your rear passengers and for your luggage. Plus, as with the Tucson, there's a model-for-model price premium of around £500 over this Kia if you want two-wheel drive, and it's vastly more expensive if you want a 4x4 version. So would Renault's Qashqai-based Kadjar crossover model be a better bet? Lower level versions are certainly priced very closely to Sportage levels, but the gap widens if you want a pokier diesel unit, and again, the Renault represents a much more expensive option if you want four-wheel drive. I keep coming back to that 4x4 thing, don't I? Kia's decision to offer all-wheel drive traction with pokey 2-litre diesel power from as little as around £22,000 creates a proposition most competitors just can't match. For that kind of money, the only 4x4 diesel alternatives in this class are Škoda's Yeti and Suzuki's SX4 S-Cross, both of which are slightly smaller, less powerful cars. Otherwise, as with the crossover models I mentioned earlier, you need to look at a four-wheel drive diesel car in this category being typically priced in the £24,000 to £26,000 bracket. To be fair, we should make the point that most crossover customers don't want four-wheel drive, which is why some cars in the larger family segment of this class, Peugeot's 3008 and Honda's HR-V, for example, don't offer it at all. Both, by the way, are comparably priced to two-wheel drive versions of this Sportage, but the Peugeot's an ageing design and the Honda has a much smaller boot. Also slightly restricted out back is Mini's comparably priced Countryman model. As for other alternatives, well, some you might come across, like Mitsubishi's ASX and the Škoda Yeti and Suzuki S-Cross models that I just mentioned, are a touch too small to directly compete with this Kia. Closer to the mark would be something like a Ford Kuga or a Subaru XV, but with those two cars you don't get affordable entry-level variants, and even further up the range there's a significant premium to pay over an equivalent Sportage. Not as much of a premium though as you pay to own an equivalent Mazda CX-5 or Volkswagen Tiguan. Both of those cars sell primarily in the £25,000 to £30,000 bracket. If, having considered all of this, you conclude that the smart styling, the strong build quality and the spacious cabin of this Kia gives it an edge on the opposition and justifies the required asking prices, then you're going to need to know just how generous the South Korean brand has been when it comes to the specification. Well, let's see. The entry-level 1 grade certainly seems reasonably kitted out, delivering you a family-sized crossover with things like 16-inch alloy wheels, air conditioning, Bluetooth with voice recognition and music streaming, powered heated mirrors, cruise control, a DAB radio and front fog lights that turn with the bends, all at prices starting at around £18,000, which does seem like a decent deal. Other standard 1 grade features include LED daytime running lights, a rear spoiler, tinted glass, an alarm, all-round electric windows, reclining rear seats, a trip computer, leather trim for the gear shifter and the multifunction steering wheel, plus a 6-speaker CD audio system with USB and aux in ports. Avoid the 1.6-litre petrol engine and you get a temporary spare wheel too. What you don't get at entry level though is the kind of media connectivity that buyers these days are increasingly demanding. Kia has kept that back to encourage buyers to trade up to the Grade 2 trim level that we've been trying here, which includes the 7-inch colour touchscreen on the dash that really completes the cabin of this car. Via this you have satellite navigation with European mapping and you get access to the full suite of Kia connected services that the brand has created in association with TomTom. Via these, there's weather forecasts, speed camera locations, live traffic information that can reroute you around jams, and a local search function that can direct you to anything from a sushi restaurant to a supermarket. Other Grade 2 features include larger 17-inch alloy wheels, power folding mirrors, auto headlamps and wipers, roof rails, rear parking sensors and privacy glass. Inside there's a reversing camera and more sophisticated dual automatic air conditioning that also cools the glove box. If you want more than that and you have a budget of around £25,000, then your dealer will offer you a couple of options. You either go for Grade 3 trim, which gets you a whole range of niceties, including a JBL premium sound system, or you choose more dynamic GT line specification, which includes styling packs that give the car a sportier feel both outside and in. Either way, you get larger 19-inch alloy wheels, leather upholstery, plus heated front and outer rear seats. Now, you might think that doesn't leave much for top Grade 4 trim to add. This is a spec you have to have if you want the more powerful 2-litre diesel engine. Actually, there's plenty, with buyers at this level enjoying a smart entry system, a panoramic glass roof, power adjustable seats with cooled ventilation, a heated steering wheel, bi-xenon adaptive headlamps with washers, and a package of extra electronic safety features that I'll get to in a minute. On to key options. Extra aesthetic touches like metallic paint, side steps, a tailgate trim line, larger 17, 18 or 19-inch wheels or chromed mirror coverings might further embellish the look of your Sportage. Practicalities include boot liners, boot sill protectors, side body mouldings, puddle lamps, dog guards and the usual floor mats and mud flaps. We want to look at a rear seat entertainment cradle too, which allows you to clip a tablet onto the back of the front seat head restraint and thereby keep those kids amused on long trips. And you could add a universal handset mount for your smartphone. Plus, there are tow bar options and the expected roof carrying systems for bikes, skis and snowboards. On to safety features. Now, like other Kias, this one achieved a full 5-star Euro NCAP safety rating, helped by a tough, rigid body shell construction and a pretty complete roster of safety provision. All models get twin front, side and curtain airbags, and although front passenger knee bags aren't provided, you do get ISOFIX child seat fastenings and front seat active head restraints that protect you from accident whiplash. Standard electronic systems include the usual aids for traction and stability control, plus ABS braking of course, with a brake assist setup to aid in emergency stops that will be advertised to following motorists by an emergency stop signalling feature that flashes the rear lights. Tyre pressure monitoring, pedestrian-friendly active bonnet and hill start assist control to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions are all additional features that make the team sheet. Off-road, a downhill brake control setup is on hand to ease you down slippery slopes. And if you're towing, a trailer stability control system eliminates trailer sway. Avoid entry-level trim and you also get 2 further key features. High beam assist that automatically dips your headlights for you at night, and a lane keep assist system that alerts dozy drivers who might be veering out of their lanes on the highway. If you want more, you'll have to stretch up to top-of-the-range Grade 4 trim. Now with this, Kia has finally got around to including the kind of autonomous braking system that some of its rivals have been offering for some time. This is one of those setups that uses both short and long-range radars to scan the road ahead as you drive. In this case, at speeds of up to 50 miles an hour, looking for potential accident hazards. If one's detected, then you'll be warned. If you don't respond, or perhaps you aren't able to, the brakes will automatically be applied to decrease the severity of any resulting accident. There's also a blind spot detection system to act as an extra pair of eyes at speed when you're changing lanes or pulling out to overtake, and a rear cross traffic alert system that will alert you to oncoming vehicles when you're reversing out of a space. As Kia is well aware, it doesn't matter how stylish or well-equipped a crossover of this kind might be, if it can't offer cutting-edge whole-life running costs and low benefit-in-kind taxation figures, then it is going to struggle. Now, with that in mind, you might wonder how well prepared this car really is for its segment. After all, at first glance, its mainstream engine range looks very little different to the one Kia offered when the previous generation version of this car was launched back in 2010. And that's a time when customer expectations in terms of efficiency were very different to what they are now. Kia reckons we shouldn't worry, pointing to the fact that though the mainstream engines are fundamentally the same as before, they have been thoroughly re-engineered to meet the more stringent Euro 6 emissions standard. And as a result, CO2 reductions of up to 29 grams per kilometre have been achieved. Take as an example of this efficiency drive the volume 1.7 litre CRDI diesel unit that we're trying here, the one that most customers will choose. This eco-dynamics tuned engine is lighter and runs with a slightly lower compression ratio and a higher pressure fuel injection system. As a result, it returns 61.4 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 119 grams per kilometre of CO2. Should loyal Sportage buyers be reassured by these figures? Well, yes and no. They certainly represent an improvement on the equivalent version of the previous generation model by 7 miles per gallon and 16 grams per kilometre, which isn't to be sniffed at. However, that's only enough to bring the returns of this engine up to the level where it can match the lesser standards set in this segment by equivalent versions of rivals like Skoda's Yeti and Mitsubishi's ASX. Kia's CRDI technology will need a fundamental rethink if it's to enable this car to match the efficiency of the entry-level diesel units used in rival crossovers like Nissan's Qashqai, Renault's Kadjar, Peugeot's 3008 and Honda's HR-V. Still, if history is any guide, it's only a matter of time before Kia manages this. The same comments apply to the other mainstream engines in the lineup. In other words, there's a useful improvement on what went before, but the figures you get are by no means class leading. With the entry-level 1.6 litre GDI petrol unit, that means 44.8 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 147 grams per kilometre of CO2 when this unit is paired up to Kia's ISG intelligent stop-and-go technology. When it isn't, as is the case with base one-level trim, those returns fall to 42.2 miles per gallon and 156 grams per kilometre. Switch your attention to the 2-litre CRDI all-wheel drive models and the picture brightens from Kia's point of view when it comes to competitor comparison. The 134 brake horsepower version that most will choose manages 54.3 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 139 grams per kilometre of CO2, which matches the kind of return you get from an all-wheel drive diesel Mazda CX-5 or Ford Kuga, and actually betters the figures that you get from comparable versions of crossovers like Subaru's XV and Mitsubishi's ASX. Nor is it far away from the kind of class-leading showing you get from much pricier all-wheel drive diesel versions of cars like Nissan's Qashqai and Renault's Kadjar. Bear in mind though that if you order your 2-litre CRDI Sportage with the 6-speed automatic gearbox, the returns take quite a hit, falling to 47.9 miles per gallon and 154 grams per kilometre. These figures are, by the way, exactly the ones you get from a manual 2-litre CRDI model with this engine in its 182 brake horsepower state of tune. Match that poker unit with automatic transmission and again the figures will fall by about 7 or 8%. When Kia extends its 7DCT automatic transmission technology to diesel models, that kind of efficiency penalty for choosing an auto box will be wiped out. And the reason we know that is that the Korean brand already makes a DCT dual clutch auto box available on the one completely fresh engine introduced with the launch of this 4th generation Sportage range, the 174 brake horsepower TGDI 1.6 litre turbo petrol unit. Opting for automatic transmission here actually slightly enhances this variant's generally unremarkable efficiency figures. So the returns of the manual version, 37.2 miles per gallon and 177 grams per kilometre, improve to 37.7 miles per gallon and 175 grams per kilometre when you order the car in 7DCT form. What else do you need to know? Well, let's talk warranties. And most cars in this class come only with an unimpressive 3-year, 60,000 mile deal. With this Sportage, in contrast, a much more complete peace of mind package comes as standard, thanks to the best customer assurance plan in the industry. A much trumpeted 7-year, 100,000 mile package. Now, it's worth pointing out that when you read the small print, you discover that you only actually get 7 years of cover on the engine and the gearbox. It's 100,000 miles and 5 years for everything else. Still, be overall package remains a really great selling point to be able to offer customers on the second-hand market. And that's one reason why residual values of this car outsmart those of most direct rivals. As an example, after the industry standard 3-year, 60,000 mile ownership period, a 1.7 litre CRDI diesel variant like this one that I'm trying here is still predicted to be worth £10,175, and that's a very class competitive figure. On to scheduled maintenance. For the 1.6T GDI power plant, garage visits are rather overfrequent, every year or 10,000 miles, so it's just as well that almost all Sportage buyers will opt for one of the other engines in the range. With these, you're looking at a much more acceptable 12-month or 20,000 mile interval, whichever comes first. You can budget ahead for servicing costs by opting for Kia's Care 3 or Care 3 Plus servicing packages, which offer a fixed cost and inflation-proof plan for the first 3 or 5 years, something which can also be passed to subsequent owners, another factor that helps in terms of residual values. Finally, we'll talk insurance groupings. For the base 1.6 GDI petrol model, we're looking at Group 11 or 12. For the 1.6T GDI turbo, that rises to Group 19. As for the diesel derivatives, well, the 1.7 litre CRDI is pitched at either Group 12 or 13, while the 2 litre CRDI is rated at either Group 18 or 19 in 134 bhp guise. Opt for that 2 litre diesel in 182 bhp form, and you're looking at Group 21. Expectations were high for this 4th generation Sportage, and it satisfies many of them. It's a product with greater quality that's safer, better equipped, more media savvy and nicer to drive. Plus, whatever you think of the looks, you have to admit that this car now has a more significant degree of street side presence. Of course, there are still boxes left for Kia to tick, but many of them will be when the brand rejuvenates its engine technology. In the meantime, what's on offer here is enough to keep this model competitive in a way that will probably lead to further sales success in this segment. It is certainly a confident car, firm in stance, in ride, and in the value proposition it offers. Exactly, in fact, the sort of thing many Qashqai-class buyers will be looking for. Yes, you could pay much more for a crossover of this kind, but after trying a Sportage, you might well end up questioning the need to. Which says it all, really.